Hey guys, so some of you asked me to create a video where I explain the second part. So part two, you are answering this question: who are they? Who the narrator keeps talking about in the story, right? They took over the other side of the house, or I heard them behind me. So, the first thing that you're going to do is go back through and reread the story. As you reread, you can use some text to speech options like Google Read and Write. If you add that app, it will read stuff for you.
Reread the story. Highlight pieces of text that.
So that's an option, or you can use Snap and Read if you've added that. But as you reread the story, what you need to be thinking about is that question of, okay, I'm trying to figure out who they are. So as you read in your copy of the text, just highlight anything that gives you a hint about who they might be. So if I'm looking at this back here, you like the house because apart from it being old and spacious, in a day when old houses go down for a profitable auction of their construction materials, it kept the memories of great-grandparents, our paternal grandfather, our parents, and the whole of childhood. So I see a couple of hints about about that question. So maybe the fact that this is an old house could give me a hint about who they are, who have taken over the house. Maybe this idea that construction materials are profitable. Maybe they could be people trying to steal parts from the other part of the house. So I'm going to highlight those things. And then we also have the fact that this house is like an ancestral family home. So you've got multiple generations have lived in this house. So if you're someone who believes in like spirits, ghosts, things like that, or at least in a fictional story, maybe you would highlight that. So I'm just going to keep going through and I'm going to highlight every time I see something that gives me a little hint about who they might be that's like making the noise on the other side of the house. And that they could be a physical person, it could be something supernatural, or it could even be something in the characters' heads, right? So it doesn't have to be a real live physical person for your answer. So you are trying to figure out what you think it is. Okay, so I'm going to do that for the whole story. And every time I find a hint, I'm going to highlight. Then I'm going to decide which 3 pieces of text that I highlighted most help me understand who they are. So maybe as I'm going, I have a lot of information about family. Maybe I have a lot of information that I highlighted about the mental state of the narrator and his sister. But I'm going to look for some patterns that will help me determine who I think they are. And the 3 best pieces of text will go, I'll copy them. So copy, and I'm just giving an example, and I'll paste it here. Okay, and so you're going to do that for 3 different pieces of the text that help you know who they are. So you're adding those 3 things, And then you are going to start working on an explanation for who you think they are and why you believe that. So you must fill in this purple blank here to say, in House Taken Over, I think that the narrator is talking about blank when he says they've taken over the back part. So that's where you're giving your answer, right? So is it people? And if it's people, who are those people? If it's ghosts, do you know, like, are they the ghosts of somebody specific? Is it, I don't know, like a possession? Is it a poltergeist? Like, what's that? Or if you think it's something going on in their heads, how can you describe that? So you can say, well, he's talking about this. He thinks this is in the house, but really it's this. Okay. So you're filling that in. Then you have some options for how to explain your answer. So for the remaining 2 or more sentences, you have some options. So I gave you 4 different options. So you could say, I believe this is true, referring back to the answer you put in that purple part. I believe this is true because, and then you can explain just from your brain what you think. Or you could pull in some of this textual evidence, right? Because the narrator says, because the house that they're living in is, quote, and then insert like a description of the house from the story. Then you have this other option. It says earlier in the story, it says that blank, which is where you would insert a quote of something that happened, which means that blank. And that's where you would explain what that quote is doing to support your answer. Like, what about those words made you think or made you come to the conclusion that you came to? And then this next sentence starter is very similar. It says later in the story when blank happens. So you would put a reference to something that happened or maybe a quote. It lets the reader know that. And then you would explain, like, what kind of conclusion did you come to because of this thing that happened? How did it lead you to your answer that you put up here in the purple? And then the last sentence stem I gave you is the author hints at who they might be when he has the narrator say blank. So you would insert a quote. It means that blank. And then this second blank is where you would explain like the deeper level of understanding that you have about that quote. So these are just a jumping off point. If you feel like you can explain your answer using just your own sentence flow, you are welcome to do that. Okay. But your answer that you finally put down here in this box, which is where I will look to give you a grade, it needs to be at least 3 complete sentences. So that will be this sentence, which you can then like copy and paste down here, right? So you can just paste it. And then you could do 2 of these sentences, or you could just write your own. But if you need more than 3 sentences to really fully explain your ideas, definitely take it, okay? And so I'm going to be grading kind of like your final draft down in this box right here. So make sure you put it all together in this box and kind of reread it, make sure it makes sense. So I have a couple other resources that might be helpful. Here, no, it's not. there it is. I have the rubric for how I'm going to be grading that part of your answer. So you have to have at least 3 pieces of text evidence. You have to explain yourself. You have to have a thoughtful answer. And your sentences need to be complete. And you need to have done a spelling and grammar check if you're shooting for an A. I also, in this presentation, have kind of like, if you're having a hard time coming up with your overall answer, this is a strategy that I use to come up with like an inference. So basically, I've already collected some quotes, and then I think about, well, what is my own personal experience related to the things that I collected over here from the text? And then I use both of those columns, so my collection of evidence plus what I've experienced in my life, and I kind of put those ideas together to come up with my overall inference. And here's an example where I have combined those ideas to make a paragraph where I explain my thought process, right? Which is really what you're doing with your answer. So that's there as an example. If you're curious about like what should my answer really look like, but do know that for this question or for this example, I used a different question. So the question I used was, how did the brother and sister feel about them? So, you know, you're answering a different question. All right. So I think that hopefully will cover it. And feel free to send me an email if you have questions or set up a tutorial with me. A reminder about how to do that is in the materials folders where it says general information and helpful links. There's this form right here that says request a tutorial appointment with Ms. Cook. So if you are just having a really hard time, or you would just feel better if you talk to me rather than watching a video or emailing, fill this out and then I'll send you a link for a tutorial. All right, good luck.